For 65 years, it was a mystery that perplexed and mystified not only investigators, but all Americans. America's unknown child, as he was referred to, remains Philadelphia's oldest case. The little boy's remains were discovered crammed into a box on a rural roadside in 1957. For years, investigators and true crime enthusiasts have attempted to uncover the secrets behind the story of the boy in the box, analyzing theories and looking for clues that led nowhere until advanced DNA testing decoded at least part of the baffling riddle.
How are we going to attack this? How are we going to even know that someone is connected or not connected to this case by them just telling us? The only way to do that, obviously, is through DNA.
But who was the boy, and what was the reason behind his death? Hello, and welcome back to Mysterious 7. Today we take a look back at a case that endured for over 6 decades, the case of the boy in the box. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, please subscribe and join our community of true crime enthusiasts. Hit the notification bell to get the latest content to your inbox, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now let's dive straight into another mystery. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is undoubtedly an iconic city. The birthplace of the United States and the cradle of democracy, where the Founding Fathers formed a new country after drafting and signing both the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. It's home to the historic Liberty Bell and World Heritage Site Independence Hall. Apart from its history, though, is another famous legend, the Philly cheesesteak, a beef and cheese sandwich that's a must-try for anyone visiting. However, Philadelphia is also synonymous with a darker legend, a mystery that captivated the nation for over 6 decades, the story of the boy in the box. On February 25, 1957, 26-year-old LaSalle University student Frederick Benonis led detectives to the Fox Chase area in Philadelphia, just off of Susquehanna Road. There they found an old box and within it the body of a little boy. At first glance, the boy would have passed for a doll. He was malnourished and naked except for a worn flannel blanket that covered his body. Although exposed to the elements, it was a harsh winter and the boy's body was preserved by the cold. Benonis, so far, was the only witness to the crime scene, and police questioned him about the discovery. Initially, he told them a story of how he'd stumbled across the box while trying to chase away a rabbit from the muskrat traps found all over the area. Later, though, he confessed that he'd been spying on some girls enrolled at the Sisters of Good Shepherd home 2 days earlier. Fearing being caught, he kept the discovery a secret until he heard about the disappearance of a New Jersey girl, Mary Jane Barker. Believing it was her in the box, he tipped off investigators. Benonis' story checked out, and a few days later, Mary Jane was discovered. Her death was ruled an accident. This left investigators baffled as to who the boy was. They returned their focus to the area and discovered the identity of the hunter who had left all the traps. 18-year-old John Porosnik was tracked down and questioned. He admitted to detectives that he, too, had come across the box and the boy in late February while riding his bike, but did not come forward as he was laying illegal traps in the area and didn't want to involve his family in any legal troubles. Neither witness had any more information for investigators to build a case upon. Investigators were to rely on the clues left behind during an initial sweep of the area. No one foresaw what would come from the investigation or how long it would take to get the answers they were seeking. An autopsy performed on the child by Dr. Joseph Spellman revealed some disturbing facts. The boy was severely malnourished, his arms and legs thin from lack of food. It was clear his growth was stunted. He weighed just 30 pounds. The boy had blue eyes with dark blonde or light brown hair. His body was battered and bruised, and when he was found, his limbs had been contorted to fit into the box. He'd been beaten from head to toe, and swollen abrasions covered his fair skin. His hair had been hastily cropped closely, either just prior to his death or post-mortem, as clumps of hair clung to his skin and the blanket. He suffered extensive injury to his face and head. Spellman discovered multiple pieces of his skull had been caved in. Curiously, they also found healed surgical scars on his ankle and groin, and a distinct L-shaped scar beneath his chin. In contrast to his injuries, though, the boy had been washed clean. His fingernails and toenails were cut very short. His feet and the palm of his right hand showed signs of pruning, which Spellman believed may have meant he was in water either before or immediately after his death. Examiners took footprints, fingerprints, and dental imprints, believing they'd be able to find some record of him at local hospitals. DNA taken from the boy was also sent out for testing, and it was now a waiting game for investigators. In concluding his findings, Spellman stated that the boy had been a victim of homicide and died due to blunt force trauma to the head. The boy's clean appearance also meant that he was not killed in the wooded area, but rather had been discarded as a way to cover up the crime. He determined the boy to be between the age of 4 to 6 and was possibly dead for anywhere between 3 days and 2 weeks. A thorough sweep of the area yielded several clues: a blue Ivy League corduroy hat, a child's scarf, and a handkerchief with the letter G embossed onto it. Further along the trail, they found clothes belonging to a woman and child. The clothes turned out to be a false lead, as the child's garments would not have fit the boy. The corduroy blue hat, scarf, and handkerchief, too, would eventually lead nowhere. Other physical clues included the cardboard box and blanket. Investigators found the blanket was mass-produced in both Canada and North Carolina and could have been purchased anywhere. The serial number on the box, though, provided a lead. Ironically, it was a box for a bassinet sold by JCPenney. The box was tracked to a store in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania. Only 12 of that particular model had been sold. However, all 12 of the shipped boxes were paid for in cash, and no records could be found. The spotlight on the case and the box prompted customers who purchased the bassinet from JCPenney to call in to inform police of their purchase. In the end, all but 4 were accounted for, but nothing more came of that lead. In the meantime, over 300 police officers and police academy recruits took to the streets, knocking on doors and asking questions. The boy's description was broadcast over radio networks. They canvassed the area looking for witnesses, and with the attention created by the case, the media too joined in the investigation. Over 400,000 posters were printed and distributed in the local newspapers and post offices with pictures of the boy printed on them. These posters were also handed out with every gas bill in the area to generate leads. Investigators went one step further. They actually dressed the boy's body and took photographs of him sitting on a chair as if he were alive. This was in hopes that it would jog the memories of anyone who may have known the child while he was alive. Artists, too, reconstructed the image of the boy to show how he may have looked while still alive. These images were once again printed on posters and in newspapers. Yet, despite all their efforts, none of these endeavors bore any fruit. Although their leads were drying up, the attention generated by the discovery would go on to produce several theories about the boy's identity in the years to come. One of the first leads came after Chief Detective Stephenson Purnell from Long Island discovered the similarities between the boy in the box and missing child Stephen Craig Damon. Stephen, who was 2 years old, and his sister Pamela were abducted on October 31, 1955, outside a Long Island bakery as their mother went inside. His sister was eventually found unharmed a few yards away, but Stephen had just vanished. Purnell contacted Philadelphia investigators with this theory, hoping to find some closure to both cases. However, a number of key differences made it unlikely. Stephen was under treatment for kidney growth and had broken his arm before he was kidnapped. The boy had undergone no such treatment, nor did he have a broken arm according to autopsy reports. They also couldn't find the distinct freckle on the boy's calf that would match Stephen's. In 2003, DNA testing conclusively ruled out that theory. Another lead came through from a man who said 2 days before the boy's discovery, he was driving along the road when he saw a middle-aged woman and a teenage boy unloading something from the trunk of a car. He assumed they had a flat tire. When he stopped to offer help, they didn't speak to him, but tried to hide the license plate number from his view. It was later discovered that the discarded clothes were found in the spot the man claims to have seen the car stopped. A barber also came forward claiming to have cut the boy's hair a week before he was found. The boy told the barber that he had 5 brothers and sisters, and lived in the Strawberry Mansions area of Philadelphia. 2 detectives were assigned to help the barber find the boy, but no such family could be found in the area. Similarly, a restaurant night manager in Camden said he had seen the little boy in the restaurant with a man who looked to be about 40 years old on 2 separate occasions in February that same year. He said the boy wanted to call his mother in Baltimore, but when police looked up phone records, no calls were made to the area on the days she claimed they had been in the restaurant. Later, reports surfaced of the same man boarding a bus with a boy sleeping in his arms from the YMCA in Camden. They were eventually identified as 36-year-old Charles D. Speece and his son 8-year-old Terry Lee Speece. The police had been on the lookout for the pair after Speece's estranged wife alleged she had not seen her son for a year. She was also one of many people who viewed the boy's body while he was kept in the morgue and told investigators that it was not her son. It would turn out many of the witnesses who came forward claiming to have seen the boy were simply mistaking him for someone else. The mystery of the boy in the box remained unsolved, and soon detectives realized they needed to put the child to rest. On July 24, 1957, several detectives pitched in to buy a tiny white coffin and gathered to bury the boy at Potter's Hill in Philadelphia, normally used to bury executed prisoners, unidentified bodies, and body parts. The burial was attended only by the investigators and medical examiner's staff, who raised funds to help pay the expenses. The tombstone read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." His grave was the only one with a marker and was lovingly tended to by strangers who lived nearby. Although the boy was now buried, investigators didn't give up the search for his identity. In June 1959, medical examiner Dr. Spellman collaborated with Philadelphia General Hospital to check for records of the boy. Given that he was malnourished, Spellman assumed he would have been treated at that facility, but no such records were ever found. In the late 1950s, a forensic technician believed he may have found the boy after reading a newspaper clipping about Hungarian immigrants at the time. In the photo, he saw a boy he described as being identical to the boy in the box. Desperate for leads, investigators looked into the theory. Years later, they did find the family, but the boy from the picture was very much alive. In February 1961, yet another break came when Captain John Kelly, who had been heading the case, sent Sergeant Frank Bennin and Detective Samuel Hammond to question 47-year-old Kenneth Dudley and his wife 44-year-old Irene Dudley in Lawrenceville, Virginia, regarding the boy in the box. The Dudleys were a nomadic family. Kenneth worked for the carnival, and he and Irene would travel the country looking for work with their 10 children. They came to the attention of the investigators after the Dudleys were charged with the murder of their daughter, 7-year-old Carol Ann. She died as a result of neglect, malnutrition, and exposure. Her body found wrapped in a blanket and discarded in a wooded area in Virginia. The uncanny similarity between the boy in the box and Carol Ann's death caught the attention of investigators. They would soon discover that the Dudleys were an evil duo. Altogether, 7 of their children had died due to starvation and neglect and were discarded in a similar manner around the country. However, police would monitor the couple's movements, and they provided an alibi that did not bring them anywhere near the boy in the box at the time of his death. It seemed all leads had been exhausted, but the boy in the box was not just another case for those involved in the investigation. Remington Bristow was one such man. Bristow was working at the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office during the time of the investigation. He'd become almost obsessed with the case and began his own investigation into the boy in the box. Being one of the investigators who had contributed to the burial fund, Bristow also continued to visit and care for the boy's grave in the years that followed. He'd gone so far as to make a mask of the boy's face and keep it with him as a constant reminder of the case that needed to be solved. He traveled across the country trying to find the answers, paying for everything out of his own pocket. He maintained the belief that given the boy's pruned hands and feet and the multiple injuries, it was possible that the child's death was caused by an accident. His desperation to solve the crime led Bristow to contact a New Jersey psychic regarding the boy's identity. The psychic described a home in the area, but after Bristow tried in vain to find the place and failed, he flew the psychic out at his own expense. Once at the crime scene, the woman was able to find the home that matched her vision a mere 1.5 miles away from where the box was found. It was a foster home, and the place was in a financial rut at that time. It so happened that an estate sale was to be held to raise funds. He was no detective and could not legally obtain a search warrant based on his assumptions, yet the estate sale afforded him the chance to investigate for himself without creating any suspicion. At the sale, he discovered a bassinet matching the one from the box that the boy was found in. He also discovered blankets similar to the one the boy's body was wrapped in, hanging on the clothesline. Bristow deduced, through his own investigation, that the stepdaughter was possibly the boy's mother. He theorized that there may have been an accident that led the family to cover up the boy's death in order to avoid public scrutiny and shame, as the girl was unwed at the time. He also believed the mother may have been disturbed in the process of burying the child and just never returned to the scene. The circumstantial evidence prompted investigators to look into the family, but after numerous interviews, there was just no concrete evidence to hold the family responsible. Bristow spent 36 years of his life researching the mystery of the boy in the box. Despite not getting the answers he wanted, he continued to care for the boy's grave and to do his research. He eventually passed away in 1993 without the answers he worked so hard to find. Bristow may have died without the answers he sought, but his work and legacy lived on. In February 1998, Bristow's work was given a look over by homicide detective Tom Augustine. Augustine re-examined the foster home theory and conducted a follow-up investigation. What they discovered was that the former foster father, Arthur Nicoletti, was now married to his stepdaughter, Anna Marie. In an interview with detectives, Anna Marie admitted to having a son, but explained that he had died after being electrocuted while on a nickel ride outside a store. After that, this theory was officially taken off the table. Augustine then approached retired detective Sean Weinstein and Daily News reporter Ron Avery for help. They met with members of the Vidocq Society, a members-only crime-solving club that consisted of retired detectives and skilled professionals. They opened the discussion of the boy in the box and even invited the press to join in the analysis of the case. They hoped the renewed interest would generate new leads. When this didn't work, the society contacted America's Most Wanted, who enlisted artist Frank Bender. Bender recreated the bust of how he imagined the boy's father would look. The episode aired, generating over 60 tips, most from Philadelphia itself. But yet again, nothing conclusive came of it. Years later, Bender returned with the theory that the boy was actually raised as a girl. In his reasoning, he noted the clumps of blonde hair found with the body, the groomed nails, and plucked eyebrows. He believed that this was the reason people could not identify the boy and set out to create a more feminine version of the boy. This lead fell completely flat, and the theory went nowhere. In November 1998, the boy's body was exhumed and mitochondrial DNA was extracted from a tooth to test against possible links given the advances in technology. These samples were used to eliminate any leads that could include possible living relatives of the boy. After the DNA was extracted, city officials requested the boy be reburied in a different cemetery. On November 11, 1998, he was reburied at the Ivy Hill Cemetery. His burial plot and casket was donated by Craig Mann of the Mann Funeral Home, who happened to be the son of the man who originally helped bury the boy 41 years earlier. At the head of the grave stands a new granite headstone with a new name, America's Unknown Child. A few years later, one of the more famous and possibly most promising theories was brought to light in February 2002. A woman whom investigators only identified as M or Martha came forward with a story that ticked many of the boxes in the case. Police noted that a doctor had made a similar claim back in 1989 about a story his patient had told him during therapy. Due to patient-doctor confidentiality clauses, they did not investigate any further. However, now that someone had come forward, they were willing to listen. For over 3 hours, police interviewed the woman. Martha alleged that her mother, who was short-tempered and abusive, had bought the boy in the summer of 1954 and kept him locked away in the basement of their home. He was named Jonathan. She told police a tale of how her mother frequently abused the boy, both physically and sexually. Martha herself was just a teenager and was also subjected to her mother's tyranny. One fateful night in February 1957, Jonathan had vomited after eating a meal of baked beans. Angered by this, her mother severely beat the child and slammed his head into the floor until he started bleeding. When he lost consciousness, her mother attempted to revive him by giving him a bath, but he succumbed to his injuries. Afterwards, Martha was forced by her mother to help cover up the crime as they both drove to the rural Fox Chase area and parked on the side of Susquehanna Road. She then recalled how a passing motorist had stopped to offer his help, but her mother insisted that she try to block the car's license plate from the Good Samaritan's view as they tried to remove the body from the trunk of the car. Then, in an effort to conceal Jonathan's identity, her mother had crudely cut his hair. Her story seemed plausible, as much of the information had been kept quiet. Her allegations about the boy's treatment matched the autopsy findings. He had shown signs of severe trauma and beating. The last meal he had eaten was in fact baked beans, and his pruned hands and feet seemed to match the bath theory. It also corroborated the statement given by the motorist back in 1957. But something still didn't sit well with investigators. Despite Martha being highly educated, detectives took issue with her being a victim of abuse and seeking help for her mental health. Investigators who interviewed neighbors dismissed Martha's claims as ridiculous, insisting that there had not been a little boy living with them during the stated time period. Investigators gave up on the lead, chalking it up to being a fanciful story to rouse attention. Another decade would pass before another potential lead would pop up. Early on in the investigation, a Philadelphia man made mention that one of his family's tenants claimed to have sold his son. He took this information to investigators, but not much had come of it. The Philadelphia witness had come to know writer Jim Hoffman, and in 2013, both men presented their story to the Philadelphia Police Department and the Vidocq Society. They urged investigators to test for DNA similarities between the tenant's family and the unknown child. Hearing of this, Louis Romano, another writer, agreed to help Hoffman and the witness obtain DNA samples from the family members in January 2014. They were able to track down one of the family members to Memphis, Tennessee. After obtaining the DNA sample, they sent it off to investigators. They agreed to investigate the lead, but needed to do more research into the circumstances surrounding the link. A look at the pictures obtained by the witness and the writers showed facial similarities between the original tenant, his son, and the boy in the box. With permission, the tenant's son agreed to have his DNA tested. In 2017, though, Homicide Sergeant Bob Kuhlmeyer said the DNA taken from the Memphis man was not a match to the boy in the box. Investigators were frustrated. Many believed the case would continue to haunt investigators and remain unsolved. Every avenue and lead had been exhausted. 6 decades was too long to keep fighting. But science was about to change everything. 2019 brought with it a new method of identifying DNA found at crime scenes. Genetic genealogy uses genetic profiles submitted voluntarily by civilians to match and identify their ancestry or locate long-lost relatives. It has, in recent years, also been used as a tool by investigators to identify criminals who may have otherwise gotten away, particularly the Golden State Killer. Determined to give America's unknown child his identity back, investigators turned to this new technology and exhumed his body again in 2019. From here, they tried to gather as much DNA as possible from the old bones. The new DNA samples, as well as old samples taken from the initial investigations, were uploaded to DNA databases. In collaboration with genetic genealogists from Identifinders International, a match was found to the child's maternal side of the family.
This was the most challenging case of my whole career. It took 2.5 years to get the DNA in shape.
Investigators now looked at the results and were able to contact a woman who they believed was a first cousin of the boy's mother. Having identified his birth mother, they were able to obtain his birth certificate, which also listed the name of the boy's birth father. Additional investigations, research, and testing confirmed the individual listed was the biological father. On December 8, 2022, police publicly announced the name of the boy to be Joseph Augustus Zarelli. According to his birth certificate, Joseph was born on January 13, 1953. At the press conference, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw praised the dedication and determination of the investigators and genetic genealogists in finally giving the unknown child a name. For 65 years, the story of America's unknown child has haunted this community, the Philadelphia Police Department, our nation, and the world. Despite the fact that Joseph Augustus Zarelli's entire identity and rightful claim to his own existence was taken away, he has never been forgotten, said Outlaw. It was revealed that both of Joseph's parents are deceased, but he does have siblings that are still living. Police declined to identify the names of both parents out of respect for the remaining family.
There's a number of siblings on both the mother and father's side who are living, and it is out of respect for them that their parents' information remain confidential.
The case, though, remains open and the investigation ongoing. Captain Jason Smith of the Philadelphia Police Homicide Unit said that they have their suspicions as to who may be responsible, but remain tight-lipped as the investigation is still active and ongoing. He hoped that the revelation would bring with it an avalanche of tips from the public. It was a mystery that stood the test of time, and through determination, dedication, and strides in science, the story of the boy in the box has been, in part, concluded. Do you believe Joseph's death was intentional or accidental? Do you believe his family distanced themselves from the tragedy out of guilt, or was there a more sinister plot afoot? We'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe.